Hey, it's Zane here and welcome back. I want to thank you for tuning in again today. Please remember to leave a like and to share this video if you get value from today's content. Now, I want to get into a discussion. I want to share three of the really top benefits of Bitcoin that a lot of people tend to overlook when they're first getting started in it. And so I want to really delve into these three areas because a lot of people first come to Bitcoin for the number go up technology. And, we understand that Bitcoin is a inherently deflationary monetary protocol because it is fixed supply. And when you have an asset that is fixed supply, that is finite, it stands to reason that as you have demand for that technology, for that network, that the value of it is going to rise. And so we understand that point. Bitcoin is inherently scarce. It is absolute scarcity. In fact, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin. But it is also highly divisible, meaning that you don't need to buy one whole Bitcoin. You can buy 1,000,000 Satoshis, you can buy 100,000 Satoshis, you can buy 100 million Satoshis. So there's 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin, meaning that it is highly divisible. You can buy however many Satoshis that you like, or percentages of Bitcoin, fractions of Bitcoin. So that's really important to understand because a lot of people look at the price of Bitcoin and they shy away from it because they think that, oh, it's too expensive. How will I ever be able to own one whole piece of Bitcoin, one whole piece of this digital real estate? But you can just own a fraction. And that's perfectly fine. And a lot of people start with a fraction of Bitcoin. It might be 0.01, it might be 0.1, it might be 0.05. You basically get to choose where you start. But it's not where you start that counts, it's where you finish that matters most. And so, I always like to say when I'm talking to people about Bitcoin and helping them to, develop the clarity and conviction to move forward and to start on their own Bitcoin journey, I always like to say, start low and grow. Start low, get comfortable with the process, get used to transacting and purchasing Bitcoin on a reputable exchange, and then get it onto your own cold storage or hardware device as quickly as you possibly can do that. So I want to get into a few key points here. Now, firstly, it's really important to understand that Bitcoin is decentralized. And it is really the first time in history that we've had this separation of money from state. Now, when I say history, I mean in our lifetime. There was a time where money was actually sovereign. It wasn't controlled by a central governing body the way that it is today. In fact, if you go back through history, you begin to realize that the history of central banking really only began in around 1913 with the formation of the Federal Reserve. And I do realise they had a couple of goes at it prior to that that were unsuccessful. And then, of course, 1913, the Federal Reserve was established, and essentially that became the proxy for central banking around the world. And so, we have to understand that our frame of reference is only one of centralised control when it comes to money. And you might say, well, what's the problem with that? We have a government, we need to trust the currency, they control it. If you live in Australia, you need to use the Australian dollar because that's the only currency that's recognised. That's how I pay my taxes. But all of these things are a function of centralised control. And so Bitcoin basically comes into the picture on the back of a crisis moment, being 2008, the global financial crisis, basically as a kind of an up yours to the central banking system. And Satoshi comes out with this ingenious protocol, which is a fixed, finite, decentralized monetary technology that basically puts the power back into the hands of the people when it comes to monetary control. And so being decentralized means it is separation of money from state. So it means that you and I have the ability to actually be in charge of our own financial destiny. We have the ability to be our own bank. We don't need permission from a third-party source. You and I can transact and transfer value peer-to-peer. We don't have anybody in the middle. We don't need a bank or a wire transfer intermediary. We don't need any of that in order for us to transfer value. We can send $10, we can send $10 million across the world in minutes in Bitcoin without any third party or any intermediary required. And this is due to the decentralized nature of the Bitcoin protocol. So that's a very important and powerful feature, and it is also something that is really important if you care about personal sovereignty and freedom and all of these kinds of things, which we understand in this world that we live in these days, in my mind is a really important feature to keep in mind. So decentralization, we have to keep reminding ourselves that Bitcoin is decentralized. And sometimes we lose sight of that because, we see the price of Bitcoin, we hear about Wall Street getting involved, organizations like BlackRock, which are very much tied to the financial system. We hear about the US government all of a sudden coming in and announcing a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And so all of these, challenges to the authenticity of what Bitcoin represents, which is money for the people, sovereignty, freedom, we start to question, well, why is this happening? You need to realize is that for the first time in history, people, just basic, everyday individuals like you and I, have had the opportunity to front run these big institutions. The reason why they're getting involved is because they know that Bitcoin is decentralized and that they can't have it in the hands of all of the people. So they need to take back control with some element of supply. And so this is why we're seeing in a fixed supply asset, they're accumulating as much of it as they can. They understand that Bitcoin can't be stopped. They understand that it is decentralized. And so we've crossed the chasm now where the longer that Bitcoin goes, the more decentralized and secure and powerful the protocol and the network becomes, the more inclined these nation states and these institutions are to want to have a piece of it. And so, we have to understand that we still have an opportunity. We are at a crossroads time in history now where if you want to stake your claim in the world's first decentralized, absolutely scarce digital monetary technology, time is running out to do that. Okay, and you still have an opportunity to do that, but the price of Bitcoin is going to run away because it is a fixed finite supply resource, and when you have infinite demand incoming for something that is fixed and finite, you understand what happens to the value proposition of that item, and this is exactly what we have with Bitcoin. We have fixed supply, absolute scarcity, and we have unlimited demand that is incoming. So that's really important to understand. So essentially, I've kind of touched on 2 points in one there, and that is the scarcity and the decentralized nature of Bitcoin, which are two of the most powerful propositions of it. But the other thing that I think is really, really powerful when it comes to Bitcoin that is not spoken about enough is the portability equation, the divisibility and the portability equation. Now, what does that mean? Right now, I'm sitting a couple of streets from home, and there's all of these properties around me, all of these pieces of real estate where there is, hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars tied up on plots of land that can't be moved. And so people have significant wealth and value and resources and capital tied up in these pieces of real estate that are basically stuck here in this jurisdiction, and their wealth is all tied to that. And so I'm sure you'll agree that that wealth is not very portable. Not only that, the exposure of this asset is limited to this jurisdiction, or certainly this country, but for practicality purposes, I'm sure we could argue that the market for somebody who actually who sees value in this property are going to be local people in the area, and maybe people interstate who see it online and perhaps would like to express interest or to buy it. With Bitcoin, we have to understand that our wealth is completely portable. It is completely portable, and it's not only completely portable, it is exposed to a global market. And for me, these are two very, very significant value propositions that makes it significantly more attractive than real estate. And so portability and the fact that it is exposed to a global market, it is highly liquid. You can liquidate Bitcoin pretty much in minutes, whereas to liquidate a piece of real estate, you need to typically engage a real estate broker or an agent. There are fees involved. Typically, you need to engage a solicitor, a lawyer, a conveyancer. You need to prepare a building and pest report. Typically, it'll take you, anywhere from 21 days to 90 days to move on that piece of real estate. Monies need to go into a trust account or escrow. They're held up for a certain period of time. And so there are all these hoops you need to jump through in order to realize the benefits or the gains from that piece of property. And so Bitcoin solves all of that. Now, I'm not saying that there's not value in real estate. I'm a real estate investor myself, and I understand the value proposition of real estate. A lot of people argue that real estate is particularly important from an investment point of view because it generates yield, it generates income. You can actually leverage real estate. So typically, if you have a 20% deposit, you can borrow the rest from a bank. And those things are all true. But when you take into account absolute scarcity that Bitcoin represents as opposed to pieces of real estate that are moderately scarce, depending on the area, but not absolutely scarce, and you really compare the value proposition over time, you begin to realize why it is that Bitcoin over the last 7 years has a compound annual average growth rate of 59%, and everything else, including real estate, sits at around 7 to 8%. And so, that in itself, even when you take into account yield and the ability to leverage through borrowing, that in itself is a really profound consideration that you should be looking at when you're comparing investing in property versus investing in Bitcoin. So portability, scarcity, the fact that you have access to a global market, also the fact that Bitcoin, I believe, represents the only true asset that we've ever seen that we truly, absolutely own. Now, what I mean by that is when we have a piece of real estate, you could argue that you don't ever really, truly own it. You only own it for as long as you're paying the rates and the land taxes, and everything to do with the jurisdiction that you're in. So essentially, in a way, you're renting it off the local jurisdiction, the council, the government, and you really only have a paper claim on that asset for as long as you're doing all the right things. Whereas, and not to mention if you have a cyclone or some kind of a national disaster. We saw in LA recently, they had the fires and people, basically whole suburbs were wiped out in Pacific Palisades and other areas. Homes that were, $3 million up to $15, $20 million worth. But what are they worth now once the house disappears and a whole area and infrastructure has been decimated and all they're left with is this burnt plot of land? What is the value of that now, and how does insurance reconcile that and the rebuilding of their home? And so there's a lot of challenges around that as well. Recently we had cyclones here in Queensland, southeast Queensland, and so there's a lot of damage now, and of course everybody's insurance premiums are going to go through the roof. And so now these are all considerations we really need to be astute at considering when it comes to where we're parking our long-term capital for future growth. So I want to wrap this video up, but I wanted to just kind of create some thought processes for you, open some loops so you can start really thinking about the real true value proposition of Bitcoin that goes far beyond just its number go up technology. Absolute scarcity is why the number will continue to go up and to the right forever. Yes, there'll be pullbacks. We've seen a pullback in the last 3 or 4 weeks, 20, 25% even. But, in a 4-year cycle bull market like we're in now, that is very, very normal. And I do know that a lot of people can't stomach that kind of volatility. But when you're talking about a 16-year-old asset, an adolescent asset, and I'm not sure if you remember when your kids were around that age. I had 3 girls in their teens, so I certainly remember it. Adolescents are volatile, and that's part of the price that you pay for having them in your realm. And with Bitcoin, once you decide to acquire Bitcoin, if you want the upside benefit, the long-term number go up growth and exposure to that, and the fact that where we are on the adoption curve, Metcalfe's law, the value of the network is very much related to the rate of adoption, and we are in the very early stages, kind of like 1999 for the internet. We have to understand there's going to be some volatility on the way to the top, and so long as you can stomach that, so long as you can have that 4-year plus time horizon, and you can put your head down with clarity and with discipline, and you can stack sats, and you can just keep following up and doing that, then you're going to get the long-term benefit. You're going to tap into the digital transformation of wealth, and you're going to see how in the long term it's going to transform your financial future, I believe. So I'm going to leave it there today, but quite a bit to consider there. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please, if you got value today, like and share this video. Please subscribe if you're new here and you want to hear more from me. And I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave me a comment, anything that resonated with you today, anything you want to share, and we'll keep this conversation going. But I really appreciate you for being here. I want to thank you for tuning in, for listening, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. This is Zane signing out. Have a great day. Bye for now.